Good
Wait, we
morning.
were introducing ourselves in here.
No, good morning. Welcome to the Discord discussions. This is the third week. This week we'll be discussing what it means to be a man in the observable world, in the context of what do you think of when you hear the word man? How does the world view men? Right. So we're going to have a conversation around multiple points of view about how we perceive the world views us because we're obviously men, so we're all going to have our own preview of that. And because of that, I'm going to introduce everybody in the room. Chris, who's an English major, he's a white collar worker, lives in Vancouver, I believe, in Canada. Bucky,
Pretty close.
he's our statesman. Bucky is 60-year-old salesman, works for. Who do you work for, Bucky?
Yeah,
Unless you don't want to say
Who
it.
was it?
I
yeah,
wouldn't.
I'd rather not say.
That's
I
fine.
wouldn't.
He works for a company. He sells shit, so that's all
Yeah,
good. Mim, he's our young cat. He's 20, in his 20s, I think. 20 or 22.
I am 20.
He's 20. Also a Canadian. I'm not sure what part of Canada
I'm
he's
just
in.
across from the Vancouver area.
And he's a truck driver. And then we got my man, Legit. He's in Michigan. He's in his 40s. What do you do, Legit?
I work at a machine shop. I
That's right.
grind carbide.
So he's a machinist. So
Yeah.
I've been, I'm 40 now, almost 49. I've been a professional salesman. I've been in the car business for 25 years of various facets. I've done everything from management, sales, service. And a part of what makes my life experience interesting is the average human talks to about 3 to 4,000 people meaningfully in their life. And in the context of my job, I've talked to 15,000, which if you've ever bought a car, you know that that's like a wonderful human experience. You get to see the best of everybody as you spend 3 hours with somebody learning more about them than anyone else in their family knows. So it's you'll know how well they pay their bills. You'll know basically everything about them. So I've had the unique experience of talking to a lot of people across a multicultural area. I grew up in the Maryland, Virginia, D.C. area. So you've got 1,800 miles with 7 million people in it. And I currently live in Dallas, in the Fort Worth area, where you have 7 million people, but it's in 9,800 square miles. So the population density between where I grew up and here is just night and day. And the culture is night and day as well. So, getting on to our topic for this week, what does it mean to be a man in the observable world? And I'm going to let Chris start off with a premise that we started prior to the podcast today, which was the idea. What was the article, Chris? The about women.
Oh, well, we were talking about perspectives,
Correct.
and you had said how there's certainly a perspective that's being, um,
Propagated.
yeah, I think because like taught is too direct. It's not being direct. It's not like written in a textbook, but certainly
No.
propagated
And
is that like men are. Well, it all came together really in an article that got passed around a lot by all the intelligent women I knew at the time who knew how to read, and it was called Schrodinger's Rapist. And it's YouTube. I don't know about if we should. Well, whatever.
now
We can
let's
always blur it out.
yeah.
I don't think we care, anyways. But yeah, anyways, it's called Schrodinger's Rapist, and the article was written by a woman, and the purpose of the article, or at least its ostensible purpose, was to be written in such a way that a man could read the article and kind of wrap his head around why women treat just like some women, not all women, some women treat all men like with a great deal of suspicion um, and suspicion, I guess, would be the real thing. And the article just basically argued that in a rational woman's eyes, until proven otherwise, you know, as a woman, you just don't know if this man that you're interacting with um, is going to rape you. And I think that in a certain, like, very myopic, bleak, isolated sort of context, it was making some kind of a point. Um, and I think its best work was done simply in that I think it did get a lot of guys to, maybe for the first time, actually just try to think about what it's like to be a woman surrounded by men that want to have sex with you, that are all larger than you, more aggressive than you, stronger than you, blah, blah, blah. So I think it did some good work there. But ultimately, I think it did a ton of damage because the view it propagated was of men all being like these
Monsters.
well, yeah, like almost like randomly generating, where it's like every man you meet as a woman, you're just pulling a slot on a slot machine and waiting to see if the wheels come up rapist and hoping they don't. So you're just hoping to not hit the jackpot.
It's almost like
And that would suggest that the more men you interact with as a woman, the higher your chances are of being raped. And I don't think the stats, as far as I know, like most rape victims know the rapist, at least in some sense. So I don't like stranger rape. I don't think is the big one. It's usually somebody who knows you.
yeah,
But
George.
anyways, point being that the view it put out was extremely negative towards men, and it's basically telling women to assume, as a matter of your own safety, assume until proven otherwise that men that you're interacting with are possible of just suddenly raping you. And of course, if that sounds a little bit like assuming guilt until proven innocent, it sure does to me. Yeah, I don't think it's rational at all.
No, and there's also, in that preview, and this is going to go across multiple spectrums, right? And I think that goes to like Jordan. I saw a conversation that was recently published on YouTube with Jordan, and a woman was asking him about, college and how to get rid of like the consensual sex, and Jordan really started, or non-consensual sex, right? So Jordan started, the answer is like take alcohol out of college,
100%.
right? Because
The answer is so
right,
easy. Get
because
rid of booze.
yeah, because in college it's extremely inebriated. 50% of the violence, right, is all both parties were inebriated. So, and his argument was that
The entire hookup culture in college,
right,
the oil that lubricates that machine is booze.
right, and on top of that, promiscuity is that, and there that's where that and that whole, I don't really want to go down that topic because that's a whole nother topic, right? But I think it goes towards the perception of men that and any opportunity in the right circumstances you're going to get raped. Going back to Schrodinger, right? Because I like that analogy of
Well, and so
of
that
a
kind of suggests that like dovetails into the idea that society views men. One of the ways society views men is like
it's a real at
out
will.
of out of control.
Well,
Like
yeah,
at
it's
any time, any one of us could just suddenly our eyes cross and we're like, "Duh, rapey time!" And no, I mean that's
so
just not.
I was going to make a little different analogy because you used the one arm bandit slot machine, right? So you've got the three wheels, right? You've got the wheel. Am I dressed provocatively? Do I have my boobs hanging out? Then you got the alcohol, drug, fentanyl wheel, and then you've got the weak man, strong man wheel. Is this a good man? Is this a virtuous man, or is this a weak man? And then, I found a weak man with alcohol, and I got my boobs hanging out. Ah, I'm raped. So ding 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 ding. So that's where that perception, I think, has
And alcohol clouds everything
oh yeah,
because, like, usually the man and the woman are both drunk.
oh yeah. So
So
neither of them are operating on full capacity.
neither can consent according to like
Yeah,
the
Jordan talked a little
leftist
bit about that.
interpretation of consent. So if both parties are inebriated, then how can you
Have
and
consent.
it lends itself to some ridiculous um, examples like you're a guy and you're wasted drunk and your girlfriend comes home from work and she's sober, and you're like, hey, baby, get over here. And she's like, sure. And she just comes and rides your dick. And it's like, did she just rape you because you couldn't consent and she was sober? I don't think she did. But I mean, according to that rationale, according to that ideology, yeah, she just raped you.
Right, but
And it's just like, but that's so like she has to wait until you're sober. She can't like your consent. The fact that you were like, hey baby, come on over here, you're hot, let's do it. No, she has to wait until you're sober. You cannot consent while you're drunk.
well,
Unless you
consent.
have like something written beforehand or like a recorded video thing. No, you can't do it under their ideology, and it's just like that makes no sense. So to me, like to bring it back to the man thing, I think that men being men getting wasted drunk is not a good thing.
No.
I think alcohol, one of the things that I like do for myself just as a little intellectual exercise is I'll look at some body of knowledge or wisdom and I'll say, okay, so what are the odds that literally every single thing in that is wrong? Probably zero, if it's some respected ancient tradition thing. So what might it be right about, or at least on the right path? And when I look at Islam, when I look at the religion of Islam and the Hadith and all their codex of ethics, they absolutely forbid alcohol for everyone, forever. And I'm like, that they're probably right about that. I mean, when you forbid alcohol, I think you get rid of so much bad behavior from men
Both
and
sides.
women, but especially men.
So-
Especially men. I mean, alcohol really, like, when we're drunk, we turn into killers because every battlefield, not so much now, but every battlefield from like World War I going all the way back to whenever we first got booze, the dudes fighting were wasted drunk. Wasted drunk. Because who would fight sober? It's crazy. Like fighting is, especially before medicine, one wound and you're dead.
Well, there's
Probably agonizingly. Like it's such a crazy endeavor. But you get drunk and then you're like, oh, let's do it.
well, there's you also got to take in consideration.
Roman legions, they all like their field rations were wine.
Yeah, I know.
They were all drunk.
Well, there's also when we're getting into the preview of men, right, and how the world views us, and there's
Well, and how to behave properly. I think a proper, like, you have how the world views us, and then I think a natural ancillary is what, like,
how should behave. Right.
Well,
So
like, is that perception correct? So we and then is it good behavior or should we correct the behavior?
Well, Jordan,
and I think like men, you don't have to be a complete teetotaler. You don't have to permanently abstain from alcohol, but I don't think that it's good, especially for an adult man. I don't think it's a good manly thing for an adult man to get so drunk that he loses control of himself. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Or his character maybe it's worse than that. His character fundamentally changes. Because I've known so many good men that get a few drinks in
and they're assholes.
they turn into demons.
So then that would be, is that man really a demon and it's an act when he's sober? And that's the only, and sobriety is the only thing that's...
Like, I'm not, like, to me, if I was a Christian, I would leave that question up to God. Like, I can't see into his heart. I don't, like, if he spent his whole, like, I'm concerned with the behavior. You know what I mean? If he has no booze his whole life and he manages to sit on those demonic impulses for his whole life and they never manifest in behavior, then I would say he's been a good person. God can see whether or not he actually had those impulses and was sitting on them. I can't. At the end of the day, I'm just happy that
you have the observable world.
Manifest them. Yeah, I really don't like mind reading. I don't like this. The leftists do that a lot. That the millennials have grown up with all these psychology terms in their lexicon that they throw around as though they have the education. Oh yeah, they'll call anyone a narcissist.
Every man in the world is a narcissist.
Or fascist. They'll call anyone a fascist who disagrees with them. Anything like that. So they don't understand these words. They'll talk about their own traumas as though they have the necessary expertise to diagnose them, but they don't. And
Well, so that's actually a good thing as we're looking at how the world views men. There's another observation of men is that we're expendable. We're of very little value in our current world. That I
So this
think is a
one,
serious problem.
is, boy, I don't
And
know about
because
this.
I'm of the
I'm going to
belief.
push back on that one
Hold
because
on, I am of the belief that there is an assault on masculinity. There is an attempt to demasculate all men, and an attempt to feminize men as it was utilized to an incredible effect in slavery in
I don't.
controlling a
That's a
species.
bit conspiratorial. Like I'll agree that it's happening. I don't know if it's
I
so
don't I don't
directed,
think
but
it
it's
I don't
happening.
think it's directed. Like I don't think there's a puppet at the top, right? I'm not of
Yeah,
that belief because you can't get past
I
stupid.
think it's a bunch of. I think it's a bunch of idiots that
Okay,
really think they're doing the best thing and don't really
I
understand what they're doing.
they I think the real reality is they're making the cardinal sin of the belief that they know what's best for somebody else. And
Yeah,
that's the real undergirding problem of the plight
you can
against
have
men.
opinions. You can have opinions about other people's behavior, but I mean, I think Peterson put it best when he said, we're not going to make the world a better place by changing the behavior of other people.
Yeah, you're right.
We all need
It's
to
like
work on
it's
ourselves,
like
and
being
then,
virtuous by spending other people's money, and
well, yeah, and I
that's a
mean,
very common thing in our society today. Is to say if this other person did something different, everything else would be better. I don't think I should change anything I'm doing because I'm too good of a person to actually have to change anything. Everybody else that I can observe around me definitely needs to change.
well, you can always tell when, like, at the end of their judgments, it's kind of like when we're playing warships and you got those players that all they do is complain about every other player.
Mhm.
I always think at the end, it's like, you just spent 30 minutes complaining about the bad behavior of players. None of that was directed at yourself. So are you saying you played perfectly, or you're just not interested in your own mistakes? I mean, either, who did, I mean, I always like to refer to Jesus when it comes to people who are focused on the sins of others and not focused on their own sins, hypocrites.
Yeah, and I think that there's a
But the expendability of men.
well, okay, we go to
So,
war, we do all the difficult
well,
jobs
it's a
that get us
complicated
killed.
topic, right?
It
Okay, but
oh yeah,
but a lot of that we want.
why
Men want to be the ones who go to war as
why
opposed to women.
why
Um, I think most do. I
okay
would prefer, like,
um,
if the existence of the country is on the line, the
okay
country that has the men fighting versus the country that only has the women fighting, the
okay.
country that has the men fighting has a much better chance of surviving, right? So,
So I'm gonna get the old man in this conversation for a minute if Bucky's interested. Um, how do you think the world views men as you've been alive 2 decades longer than me, or a decade longer than me?
Well, all the article was for was to back up the toxic masculinity argument. Just another bullet in their chamber, if you want to say. And I understand because I have a daughter, but when girls hit puberty, they have to go on guard. And plus, they're told by the other women in their lives to be on guard. Now, they're not on guard per se. I don't think to be raped more than just on guard to make sure they're not taken advantage of in any way. But also, you have to keep in mind of hooking up with a bad man, not that rapes you, likes to hit you. Also, because again, women are smaller, weaker in most cases. I'm not going to say in all cases,
Oh,
um, but they have to be on guard to some extent. But it's a little overkill to think that every man's wanting to rape them. They obviously know that's not true. They have a father. If they didn't have a father, then they have no clue what to believe, and they'll just
well, and that's
could be
you
nuts
kind of
like the mother.
you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because how many of these people are being raised without fathers now, right? It's a lot.
I'll get on that in a minute. Mem, what do you think, buddy?
Um, well, I mean, they've put down most of the points I would have agreed with anyway.
But
'Cause
you're a 20-year-old man.
Hop
How
on
do
to
you?
male expendability then, because
Yeah.
male
that I think is a
expendability.
topic that, like, to me, the idea of males being expendable, like, is both a biological reality and necessity, but it isn't being respected. And
That
I think
sacrifice is not.
yeah,
Yeah.
men are to me, men are biologically hardwired to want to sacrifice everything if need be to like protect our families and women. And the women in families traditionally throughout history have always given big respect and
We get the big piece of
honored that.
chicken.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you get the big piece of chicken because you need
Yeah.
to be the biggest and strongest because you're the one who has to go out and fight the goddamn bear.
The dragon.
So,
You have to slay the
yeah,
dragon.
you have to go fight the dragon, so you need to be the biggest and the strongest.
You get the
to do
biggest
it.
piece of chicken.
And you're not going to eat the biggest piece of the chicken if it means that one of your children goes hungry.
And that's the sacrifice that men will make. Yep.
Then you'll give some of your chicken to the kid. But I mean, it's
Mhm.
yeah. But anyways, you talk.
I mean, I've heard all about all this stuff all my life, and then it's just like never thoroughly think about it. Mainly because, well, I've never really had a stay-long girlfriend or anything. Which, hey, everyone here is like all the toxic girls and stuff, the ones who want to go after the jocks and stuff. I was never one of them, so I'm just here. So I never had much experience with all the
I'll
stuff that we've been talking about.
I'll let you in on a little secret that you might find interesting, and this is something that me and Chris were talking about this about a gentleman who's not here today, Phil. Phil's 20 something, right? But Phil doesn't have an interest in women right now. Phil is interested. He already owns a company. He's in the process of building a second company. He's all about making him better. And there's another young guy, Hot Wheels. He's like 16, meditates 30 minutes a day, reads the Bible 30 minutes a day. He's planned out his time to become an improved version of himself. What both of those men are doing without understanding is that instead of trying to find a mate in their 20s, by the time he hits 30 to 32 years old with successful business, he's well put together, he's financially secure, he's got his pituitary gland is functioning, he has a real understanding of who he is as a person.
Smart guy, speaks well.
Well.
I'm
At
sure,
that
I'm sure
point,
he can be funny if he wants to be.
you-
he's got it all. He's got all the pieces. Or he will.
those men in their 30s will literally be able to pick whatever mate they want, whatever female they want, whatever 10 dime piece.
I don't know about 10, but I mean, you're gonna be.
Your value is
like,
huge.
compared to your pickings in your 20s.
Oh yeah,
you think that as you age in a man and go into your 30s, your pickings would be less.
No, it gets way better.
Less hair, a little gray, and it's so much better. I mean, it is just women are not men, and women have a much more sophisticated set of criteria for judging their prospective mates because their investment share is so much higher than a man's. So, I mean, biologically, it makes good, smart women are super picky.
Oh yeah.
But those are the best women, and those women see a guy like him. Oh yeah, that's the one.
And and we had used Obama right last week as an example. Freaking Michelle Obama. Yeah,
bitch her whole life.
She was a successful woman.
She was already partner in the same law firm that Barack came into. But when she saw Barack,
she married him.
Oh, she was like, oh, that's the big swinging dick in the room. That guy's going somewhere. I will take some of him. I need to hit. And she also subordinated her own career to support his. and to transition into the
support role,
becoming the matriarch and the mother of a family. Well, because as soon as she saw him, she just trusted. Like, oh, that he's going to take it. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
She's pretty successful on her own. She didn't forego anything in her career.
She forgoed something in the temporary, and then her gamble really paid off because he turned out to become the president. So, now she can write a book and go on an arena tour
and make millions.
Being the wife of the president and have FU money, but she went from being a partner in a young black woman, intelligent law firm partner. So she is ticking every single block. She is on her way, I mean, she's already partner at like 25, so she is just killing the game, and she can do whatever she wants. She subordinated that when she hooked up with Barack, because she was like, as good as I'm doing, he can go even. Like, I think she just, like, some part of her did the math, and she's like, as good as I can do, I think that guy can do better. I'm going to support him,
She hitched
give
herself
him
to that
everything.
wagon.
And well, no, I think that's a bit. It's not hitching. Well, she hitches herself to the wagon in the sense of being in the front of it, pulling it faster. I think that like a good woman who does all the right things gives a man like that, especially like for his presidential run. You know, having that like perfect family behind him and all
She
that
helped get him elected.
so, oh, absolutely helped him get elected. Yeah. So, you know, a good woman can do so much to make a good man go even
Better.
higher.
That's that's the old adage behind every great man is a better woman, right?
Behind that woman is his mistress.
Yeah, back to the thing you were saying earlier about finding the mate thing. I kind of gave it up a little while ago because it's like, even in high school, anyone I had like an interest in was just like, oh no, nothing would work there. And so after a while, I was just like, I need to get financially stable before I do anything, which is now I've got a 25 an hour job. So
Right, but that's the thing. Is
I
like,
think subtly the tables have turned over the last 10 to 15 years. It used to be that women were the prize. And one of the things the red pill community says that I actually really agree with, because it's been my experience as well. I never was much of a chaser. When I did chase, it always ended up poorly. And the best relationships were the ones where I was just doing my own thing, doing it really well, killing the game, and the women came to me. And I think that is the model going forward. Not that men should be submissive and like waiting for a woman to approach you, but more in the sense where it's like, I don't think if you're a man anymore, you have to go and look. I think really it is you work on yourself, you focus on yourself, and you improve yourself to such a point where women around you that
it's
wouldn't have given
competency.
you a second look before, oh yeah, they'll see the competency and they'll see your confidence that goes with it. It's like a guy who I remember is one of the there was a guy I worked with at the IHOP who was like 5'5" and drove an absolute beater car, like the worst car I'd ever seen, like a $500 car. And he had the hottest, awesomest girlfriend who was also a waitress there. And she was like the same height as him. And yet didn't like it just didn't matter because he looked really good. He took really good care of himself. And all of his like he was a whole like all of his money he was saving. His wife didn't spend anything on the car. And I remember talking with her one day because all the guys in that place wanted, I can't remember her name, but she was like just total wifey material. She was so great. But Jim was the guy's name. Jim had her totally locked up. He married her later. Ellen. Oh, Ellen. And yeah, all the young guys there wanted Ellen because not only was she hot, but she was also started talking like she didn't really she usually was always busting his balls and taking the piss and all that, but that was like but in a fun way. Just one day she just started talking real about him. It was just like because I said like, didn't that car kind of throw you off, because even back in the day, like, you want to have a nice car, and his car is such a beater. And she said, no, he was, when he came to pick me up on that first date in that car, my heart kind of sank, but he was so confident. Like there was no the fact he was almost proud of the fact that he had this beater car, and she just and basically she said like he never ever considered that car to be a weakness to him. It didn't bother him. He just had so much confidence that it turned it into a strength. And I think something that it's in the psychological literature. I'm pretty sure women um, women find their mates like when they're mated to a man that they're going to stay with their whole lives, they find them more attractive like physically over time. Women are just kind of naturally adapted to find their long-term pair bonding mate more attractive over time, as long as he keeps being that guy. Sadly, men in the literature that I'm aware of are not wired that way, and I think the biology is obvious for why. But
Well, there's more to that, right? There's the aspect of, when women view men, when the world views us, there's a lot of lenses that get put in front of that, right? And men are put under a pretty large level of scrutiny, and women are put under the scrutiny of whether it be um, beauty.
Women are judged by beauty. Men are judged by production.
By
As
deeds.
as a general rule, yeah, deeds, yeah.
So what can you do for them? And that's and it goes back to
It doesn't even have to be for them specifically. It's just more, what can you do?
well, that
Can
was
you
like
do something,
I
something useful?
I have had a theory I've been thinking about for years, and it comes to the idea that men as a group, right, and me as a man, we have a standard that is a moving goalpost all the time. So when you're a young guy, you gotta do good in school, or you gotta be an athlete to get the girl. You gotta have physical prowess, and if not, that's okay, right? But then you go to college, and
And you have to
then
be cool.
or cool, right? Then you hit college or the workforce, right? If you go to college, then the guy that gets the girls is also the jock or the socially adept, the physical attractive guy, and then you got the guy that's in the MIT class that he's going to invent something that makes him a millionaire, and then the hot chick cheerleader will like him when he's made the $1 million because now he's
Yeah.
got competency, right? So there's men in their 20s have a much different challenge than men in their 30s, men in their 40s, men in their 50s, men in their 60s. So I think that there's
But at the
a
same time, it's you're going to be doing the same thing to
right,
meet
but
those challenges, which is working harder and smarter than everyone else, or as much as you can.
so men have a competency requirement for us to get any level of attention, affection.
Well, you're designed to work.
Yes,
I
we
mean,
are the
you can
greatest.
really.
I said I've been working on a theory and the idea that women don't understand the game that they're playing. Truly don't understand. Especially when it comes to the idea of the dating world. Because if
Well, they've
you,
gotten a bit lost. I
yeah,
think they got a bit lost because I think women used to understand it fine.
they don't
I think
anymore. They think
it's
that
gotten a bit confused. Yeah.
the older men get, the more valuable we are. Women age like milk.
Well, I think women are starting to pick up on like the basics of that sort of thing.
Oh
That
yeah,
sort of
they're
social
the
marketplace
30
value,
the
the sort
30
of
year
sexual
old.
marketplace value. You know, Kevin Samuels and Fresh and Fit and and Ab and Preach, all those guys have done a pretty good job of just kind of drilling in the hard reality of how delusional some of these ladies are when they're talking about, you got these women who are just, I mean,
25.
well, I'm thinking their looks. I'm like just busted. Like they're a 3 at best, and they're talking about getting a
Well,
$200,000 engagement ring,
yeah,
and you're just
and the
going
catfish
in
women.
no possible. Oh no. Okay. Well, the catfish women are different. The catfish women I don't mind as much because the catfish women at least know that they're catfishing. They know that they're lying. It's the women who don't. It's the women who are 3s who honestly think they're 10s, who
Oh
send
God,
you
too many.
pictures of. Yeah, it's so many, and I mean, and it's all been discussed. It's because women hang out in these social groups where they all pump each other up. They all tell each other that they're all 10s,
Oh, I've
and
seen so many of those videos on TikTok and stuff.
oh, I sent what my mom didn't believe me. I finally sent her a video of Pearl talking with a black lady who average looking like me. I don't know, a 5 at best.
Hmm.
And she was talking about the $200,000 engagement ring.
Oh
And
yeah.
you've probably seen that clip. Yeah, it's a pretty well known clip. And my mom I mean, we went to White Spot the next week, and
Oh, great
just
spot.
for, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, she's an old lady, right? So where to
Mhm.
go? Take your mom. But yeah, and the first thing she brought up was she's like, I couldn't believe the video. I just watched it over and over. I couldn't believe. I sent her one of the little YouTube shorts of it, And I said, yeah, you hear it described to you and you're thinking, hyperbole, exaggeration, translation, whatever. But then you see it and it just straight from the horse's mouth. And it's like, do
It's
you
like, what's
think
that, a
she's acting?
simulation?
Yeah, exactly. Like, do you think she's acting? Do you think they're doing that for
Oh,
views?
no.
No, I think
Because I've
she's
seen many
telling the truth.
more, and it's like there's this channel called The Sidemen. They started off as a kids YouTube group. They grew up, whatever, and they have this thing where they have one guy versus going up against like 20 women to see who's a likable person to date or something. Just the premise anyway. And a bunch of these women are the same type we've been describing here. One of them's like, she looks like a 6 with all the makeup and clothes she on, but she's like a little heavier and stuff. And it's like one of her friends was there and she was talking some hard smack but didn't look that great, and he's like, okay, you need to leave, you're getting on my nerves with all this. And then she comes over and she starts going off on him about going off on her. It's like, hey, you're not the one in charge here, you're the same as her, go. Just go. And she's like, no, you need to leave. And then she's like, he was mind blown.
It's
And
pretty amazing, some
he
of the
started
delusion.
to yell offset at other people like, security, get these people out, they're getting on my nerves for how bad it was.
That sounds like Fresh and Fit has had that happen, and I don't like Myron. I don't like the other guy. Who cares what his name is? It's Myron's show.
I don't even know what Fresh and Fit is.
Oh God, they do that. They're out of Miami. They do the same thing where they're a red pill duo that runs a podcast that has these women, just has women on, just Miami chicks, and oh God. Oh, some of the things they say, you're just going, okay. I mean, there is a camera on you. People act different when they're on camera, and blah, blah, blah. But still, it just baffling. And they do that thing where sometimes they'll just like they can't stop over talking Myron or the other guests. They just can't stop talking, and Myron's like, you have to let other people talk. Shut up, shut the F up. And finally, he'll be like, okay, you got to go. Kick him out. And then sometimes they'll posture as though they're not going to go.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're a female. I don't want, like, there's some kind of delusion here where you think that, I mean, obviously Myron's not going to lay a hand on you, but you're posturing as though you're some kind of a physical. It's like when women use the phrase, oh, men are intimidated by my success. And that's one of those things where I'm just like, that's got to be just a difference in how men and women use the phrase intimidate. Because when you use the word intimidate to a man in that way, I don't know a single man who is intimidated by a successful woman. That's not a thing. That's intimidation requires, like, maybe she'd be intimidating if she was successful, like she's the head of a group of assassins. But even then, the intimidation factor isn't coming from her. It's coming from all the male assassins that she can command to kill me. It's not her exactly. Like, it's just this thing where it's just like,
you're sitting on your high horse.
well, and you're standing there acting as though you have a physical presence that you do not have, and we can't directly show you that because it's really not.
It's socially unacceptable.
Put hands on a woman, especially on camera.
Did you? So I want to bring.
But it's like, it never used to be a thing that ever had to be
explained.
Like, women never ever in the old days, I think, forgot that there's a physical difference between the sexes. The way women do now, like some of the videos I've seen of women just hauling off and clocking guys on the street. And,
back
and it's just like,
I was there, and if a guy got in an argument with his wife and he beat her around a little bit, the cops didn't show up, and if they did, they'd go, okay, calm down,
Oh, yeah.
They didn't haul people off to jail and everything else. It happened.
So interestingly, I'm going to.
There was a lot of spousal abuse that just kind of got.
Good old Boyd.
That got swept under the rug because it was just.
It happened with boyfriend-girlfriend shit, too, or a girl challenging a guy in a bar, which wouldn't happen.
Oh, because it's just so. I've seen so many videos now. I saw a video of a girl that couldn't have been more than like 5'5", and she throws a punch. She had to throw it like 45 degree up. This dude was so tall, and she throws this closed fist punch at this like 6'6" guy and actually turns his jaw and hits him. And he just, like, you could tell it's just pure instinct. He just like straight arm jabs her one, and it sends her flying backwards through the bar glass. And it was just like, oh shit, yeah. And that's why it's like, you know, guy shouldn't have done that, but lady shouldn't have hauled off and tried to pop a guy that could clearly just.
He thought he wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just like, I don't want to be the guy, you know, sitting on screen saying it's okay for men to hit women, but it's not okay for women to go around hitting men as though they have a right to it, and as though, like, the attitude they have, you know, like, to do that and then to stand there in front of the guy,
Expect nothing
like,
to happen.
yeah, not even have the decency to run away.
That
Like,
reminds me when
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have no problem with a man defending himself. If a woman comes up and hits me, I am going to attempt to drop her like Ray Rice did his girlfriend.
if a you know, women hitting with closed fists is the one that to me is just like, if you're throwing a closed fist at me, I'm going to assume like that you're not slapping me.
You forfeited
You're
the
not slapping
female.
me as a female thing because your words don't work anymore and you're just so mad at me and you give me a little slap. I'm not going to deck you because you slap me. But if you throw a closed fist, like with the proper shoulders,
You're trying to injure me.
Well, yeah. Now I'm just treating you like a threat, and that's not a gendered thing because women can beat you up if you let them. And some women are so
I
strong
was
that
in the
you.
Navy with some rods that could beat your ass. I guarantee.
Yeah.
Well, so
I played junior league baseball with a husky chick that I'm pretty sure grew up to be a lesbian, and I remember she could stand on home plate and throw the ball over the right field fence without even like taking a run at it. Like, there's some chicks that'll freaking surprise you.
yeah, my sister's one of them. She's got a lot of my dad's natural strength. I mean, I got his well, but she's got his like ability to actually think about using it. I don't. I've got my mom's timid side with it, so I don't like using my strength that much because never was for me. But back with the thing with the woman going around like they have the right to him, it reminds me of when Bill Burr was talking about that with his show once, where he was talking about where's the consequence and stuff.
Yeah,
I can't remember everything, but
how much
yeah.
of a jackass would I be if there was no social consequence to being an asshole? What was the thing? He's like, just walk up to some big muscle-bound guy walking out of the gym. Hey, little muscles! Slap the protein shake out of his hand. Oh, fuck you, asshole! And then just walk away. Because nothing could happen to you. It's just like, yeah, I'd probably do that if like, but in no universe is that possible for a man to do to another man.
No, there is always threat of physical violence is universal amongst men. If you are in the proximity of another man, you have to be held. You actually not have. You will be held accountable for your behaviors and what you say towards that man. Now, I've been around the MC community for most of my adult life, and the MC community has a really interesting saying that is so motorcycle community, bikers. Motorcycle clubs, bike clubs.
Yeah.
MC actually stands for men's club because it initially started as just for men. So, and over the years, people have associated MC with motorcycle club, but it's in fact a men's club. It started at the end of World War II, but the original MCs, the original clubs, right? The rule is this: ignorance is bliss. The education is always painful. You can be ignorant to our culture, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get your ass beat for it. So
that's what Hunter S. Thompson found out when he rode with the Hells Angels for a year, and they didn't like the article he printed up, and he almost died. He said that one dude was the one, like there was a group of Hells Angels kicking the shit out of him in a circle. And there was one dude that he just kept his eye on because he's like, that's the guy who's going to take it further than a beating. And at one point, he saw the guy pick up this huge rock, and it was just, and like he was yelling at the guy, and somebody took the rock away from him, and it was just there was this one dude who he said like he knew he was going to survive the beating if that one guy didn't get his hooks into him. It was just like there's always one in the group, but I mean he talked about it. not with any sort. Hunter S. Thompson talked about that beating for, well, the rest of his life, and he never talked about it with like anger. He talked about it like, oh yeah, no, I knew that, I'm hanging out with very dangerous people who mean what they say and
Always.
who put a lot of like everything is respect, and I'm going to write something that's a bit disrespectful about their culture, and there's probably going to be a consequence for it, and there was, and I paid the consequence, and I think Hunter just considered it a done deal at that point, but he knew it was coming, and he didn't. He just didn't want to die for it.
Well,
He was like a
I'll be
hero
right
in them.
that's where there's definitely, and I think it goes back to our initial topic, right? Is that how do we perceive men, right? So our society perceives men in a lot of different ways, right? So they view us as the single greatest resource producer, okay? So if something needs to be gotten, killed, hunted, built, made, or defended, we are the primary resource for doing that. When people need to be defended, we're the primary resource for that to get done. Now, that puts a whole lot of pressure on men as a group, right? And society makes men, and men are forged, right?
Hmm.
Steel sharpens steel. So, part of what this discussion is attempting to do is to put out information for men to be able to consider the idea or the absolute tonnage of responsibility that men are responsible for, that are accountable for. Because as a man, you're a young man, you have to get yourself together, make yourself competent. And Peterson talks about being the type of mate that if you met the girl of your dreams, right? Who's to say that you are the in a position that you aren't going to scare the shit out of that girl and make her run for her life, right? You have to be in the right place mentally, physically, emotionally, financially to be a mate to someone else, to be a good man, right? And being a good man is not an easy thing to define, right? Because we've talked about how the world observes men and how the world puts men under unnecessary scrutiny. We have unrealistic expectations of us. We have
What are
unrequested.
some of the unrealistic expectations? That's a good.
We're not allowed to have emotions. We're not allowed to
Oh
have
yeah. Oh,
feelings.
I
We're not
remember
allowed.
that.
We're not allowed to
Okay, so let's
like
pause
that's
on that because that's a good thing to talk about.
Oh yeah, very much so.
so like if you take the average young guy, right, and at least when I was growing up in the '70s, right, you hurt yourself. Yeah, boys don't cry. I'll give you a reason to cry. You
Oh, I
just
remember the boys
squash
don't
that
cry
down,
thing when I was
right,
a
and
kid.
then it's like you defend your mother and you take care of your sister. You don't let anybody talk bad. There's this whole ideology that our emotions are if we show any level of effeminacy, that that's
Okay, well,
weakness.
right. So yeah, oh yeah, there's a
So
jump there, but yeah, it's like showing emotions equals
feminine.
being
Right.
feminine
That's
Hmm.
equals weakness. Yeah.
right. Like there's that. I don't know where. I know where it came from. It came from the fact that if you take the turn of the century, 1800s to the early 1910s, when we were marching across the west of this land in the United States, men had to do things and survive in unhospitable conditions, and they had to establish societies in places that were not habitable. They became habitable with men doing unbelievable amounts of work, and then the women that they had to bring with them so that they could procreate and they could help build the society. Women had a very specific role in what they were doing. Men had also a very specific role, and nowhere in that role was them to be, oh, I mean to talk to you about how I feel. I really don't feel good about going out into that rain
Yeah,
thunderstorm. Yeah.
because that conversation, that's like the domain of women. Women want to be the ones talking and processing their feelings with their man, but not vice versa.
No.
They don't want to help their man process his feelings and emotions. They want him to be able to deal with that himself with his own internal resources. He's got to be the strong one that they go to when they need help. And
We're the rock. We're the
yeah,
foundation. Men are the
yeah.
foundation of every home. And that's
Well, I
one
think they
of the
want us to be
problems.
the calm ones. I think that there's a natural. Well, I mean, Peterson talks about order and chaos. Um, I find that it's a bit simplistic, but I mean, I think he's describing in a very generalized, low resolution way something that is there. I mean, women. I'm pretty sure it's in the psychological literature that women experience their emotions more strongly than males.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure it's there, and it's self-evidently true. And I mean, women themselves will own it, particularly when it's in their defense or own interest to do so. They'll own it and say, like, "Well, yeah, we're the more emotional of the sexes." Um, so I think that like it's a weird one because I think there's a balance where it's like I don't think that a properly constituted man in a rational, good sense, not in like the leftist way, but in something that a bunch of guys could or a bunch of people could cobble together. I think what would be agreed upon in a good man isn't a man who is highly emotionally unstable.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
They want
I
a
don't
man
think
who's emotionally in
anyone.
control.
Yeah, so I think there's where the balance is, right? Where women like guys who have their emotions under control. And I think that women, if asked, you know, with without it being a zero sum game, but just comparative, like, would you prefer to be the more emotionally expressive of the two, of you and your partner? If you ask that to most women, I think if they were being honest, they would say yes.
And
And I
there,
think they would say that's how it is.
well,
So,
there's an observation that I used to make when I was talking to a husband and a wife at the dealership, and I would say, here's the best example of how I can show you the difference between men and women. And it's a joke, but it's so true. As I asked the woman, said, "How are you?" And she goes, "Oh, I feel great." And I asked the husband, he said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm good." And I said, "Okay, ma'am, what did you base your answer on?" And she was like, "Oh, she'll give me her emotional condition. If
well,
every
she
guy in
led
the
with
world
"I
feel
feel"
right, and a guy,
versus "I am,"
but a
which is
guy
just
is
a
going
declarative statement
right,
about reality.
right. Men, if there's nothing, a man answering that question is telling you his physical condition. He's telling you the state of his position. So, are you good? Yeah, there's nothing physically wrong with me, so I am good. Nowhere in that did he consult his emotions at that time. He told you his physical condition, and a woman told you her emotional state. And that's the one of the things that really has stood out to me over time in dealing with the sexes is that men have 90% of their thought process to do with the observable and effective world around them, right? So they're about things, they're about the world around them. They are the masters of their environment. Women are the masters of the people. Women are the builders of society. And the problem we've got, and this is going back to the fact that men are being devalued, is that look at the problems we have in our society, and there's the
Well, yeah,
removal of men. They are the
I think a lot
removal
of it's
of,
confusion. Like before we talk about the problems of society, just talk about the emotional stuff. I mean, I think a lot
but
of
that
it
has
is
that's a it's
it's
a
there's a
symptom.
confusion. There's a confusion, I think, where I think a lot of it is what we don't have. We have all of these ideological narratives, but I think what's lacking in our society in a lot of situations, like climate change, although we're not going there, um, but climate change is an example of like one where we have all these very negative narratives, but we don't have a positive narrative of like what a good world could look like if we made a bunch of rational changes that didn't tank the economy. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to like trying to conceptualize what a healthy and balanced, you know, heterosexual relationship should be in terms of like the expressed emotions of both parties. And I think that because men traditionally occupy the protector role, which is the you know the strong the role of being strong and powerful and carrying the potential to do violence. I think those are all like the most serious of things and with the most serious of consequences. And I think that there's a natural and very logical correlation between that and needing to have um, personal control, especially of emotions that can make you act irrationally. If you're going to, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that if you're going to be, you know, like Joe Rogan said at one of his stand-ups where he was talking about, you know, the four people that he loves more than anyone else in the world is his wife and three daughters. You know, he'd do anything for them. But if it came down to a physical confrontation with him versus his wife and three daughters, like beat the crap out of all of them. Like if they're guarding the door, he's getting through. No offense to them, but it's not even going to be close. And that's, I think, the way it is for that norm. In that normative relationship, you would, in that stereotypical relationship, the male is going to have that pretty massive power imbalance. And I think the logically, you have to have the control to go with that. Otherwise, he's just going to end up killing everyone.
It's tyranny.
Mad. Well, yeah, exactly, and it's going to be awful. So the control has to go with it.
Right.
And
so
I think that the other side of that. So I think properly, like I think the proper narrative for that is that a man having that level of emotional control and not expressing his emotions that much is good, because you need, that is what goes with being a man of confidence and power,
character.
and being somebody who's considerable in the world, is that you do have to walk a bit more carefully, because you know we don't want to be hurting our families. On the female side, because the other side of the narrative is really important too, and I think this is what maybe women don't understand, because maybe men don't talk about this as much. Maybe we're not that good at expressing this side of our narrative. But I think from a man's perspective, again, properly constituted, a good relationship between a man and a woman, the woman being more emotionally expressive about life and things in general, the man takes pleasure in that. A man, I think, properly constituted, who loves his wife, who sees his wife like crying at a romantic movie. You aren't crying as well, but I think the man gets some kind of emotional release from seeing his wife in that condition, knowing that it's voluntary, that she's just in her feelings, and she's just, you know, or when his wife's really happy when he brings home flowers and she like starts crying, which isn't something that you would do if you came home and she'd made you a nice dinner or whatever the equivalent is. You'd just be really thankful. But when she cries, like, it makes you as a man, like, that's a good thing. And I think that because like women get to express their emotions more like that, I think it allows men to experience those emotions without having the negative control issues that go with it, that you can't have if you have power.
I think it comes back to,
that's my theory.
Right. So there's you know, Peterson talks about being a dangerous man and then learning to control it. Right. He talks
yeah.
he talks a lot about that, and I think by our nature, men,
Just to be clear, there's nothing worse
than a
to
weak man.
That. Well, there's nothing worse than a man who does only one of those two things, who becomes very, very powerful with no control, or very controlled with no power. Either way, that's not good. You need both.
Well, so I'm gonna bring a little personal conversation into this about my own life. That I have the benefit of a really phenomenal mate with my wife, and I get to talk to her about things that I know I would have never discussed in any other female that was in my life. I would have never had this conversation with them. But with my wife, I don't have a facade of me. You know, I had a heart attack in 21, and I never emotionally managed that. I was like, "Oh, I'm good." And I went to work a week later, or less than 10 days after having a heart attack. I was back at work because my family had bills, and I had a heart attack that put me in the hospital, and I had a stent
And
put in my heart.
it's good to get back to work, but yeah, you haven't emotionally processed it.
So
There's no way.
I had no ability to manage that, and then before that in 2015, I got hit on my motorcycle, and lady T-boned me. She broke my shoulder socket, right wrist, left hand. I was really messed up, and I went to work 7 days after I was out of the hospital
God.
with two broken hands. My wrist was broken, my hand was broken, my legs were still shredded. Um, the internal bleeding had stopped, but my wife drove me. Well, at the time, she was my girlfriend, but she's my fiance. She drove me to work every day. She would get up and go to work at 4:30 in the morning. She would come back at 9 to drive me to work at 10 and help me get ready. And then she would go back to work and finish her day out, come back home, feed the kids at 5:30, and then at 6 she would leave the house and drive to Alexandria to get me at the dealership at 7 and then drive me back home, and we'd be home at about 7:45. And then she would, we would spend some time together and then go to bed and start it all over again. She did that for, God, almost 45 days until I got the cast and stuff off my hands so I could drive myself. And my shoulder socket had been broken. So, and I never dealt with that trauma. I was at work a week after that happened. And come to find out, and I found this out in the last month or so, I was having panic attacks and anxiety attacks because I had never managed two separate traumas that nearly killed me both times. And I never talked about it with my wife. And I just, one night, I just said, you don't understand. I live in fear all the time. Like every night, I'm in, if anything happens to my heart or I feel heartburn, indigestion, I'm about ready to have a fucking panic attack because I think I'm having a heart attack again. And then I've got angina that literally mimics a heart attack, and it's not. So like, I never.
Hey, like if you, well, I remember the first panic attack I had. God, I haven't had them for so long now, but it was back in my late 20s, and a friend drove me to the hospital because I actually thought I was having a heart attack. I didn't have any idea that I even had anxiety. It
So
was just
that's
like, oh
that, and that was when I talked to my wife. I mean, that was really an amazing relief to be able to say to someone else that I'm afraid,
Yeah.
and that is very hard to do, and I would have never done in my 20s. I would have never done in my 30s. That it,
Hmm.
now
and
you know you have a good woman too, by the way, because I've, um, I remember I cried in front of a girlfriend once, and Dennis Miller did a bit about how you
oh
only do
yeah,
that once, and I was like, yeah, but the asterisk I would put on that is that if you do it and you're with the right woman, it'll be okay. But
well,
don't take it as some license to start crying all the time. But but if you do it with the wrong woman,
Oh, you gonna
she
get fucked up.
won't. Well,
she
I
won't
mean,
respect you.
yeah, and she won't know how to handle it
Nope.
in the moment, and she's gonna act weird.
Oh.
That was my experience.
Well, I just like to add back with the not knowing how to process the emotions thing. It's like one time I was at work and I was at my old job. I was driving back from another town overnight where I did bread, and we had just gotten a snowstorm here, and roads are icy and stuff. But I was in the 5 ton, so I was okay for just going over the regular snow because of the weight of the vehicle. I wouldn't slip out as easy as a sedan. And I was going over, passing people, and there was one spot where there was a chunk of snow which looked like it fell off another truck's mud flat, but it rolled up into a bigger snowball, and it was over a patch of black ice. And I was going around a corner about 70k, which is under the speed limit. It was a 90k highway, and I went around the corner, hit the ice, and my back end of the truck went like right, left, like 5 times in the matter of 20 seconds, and I could have rolled off the hill, slight hill I was on, into a ditch and squished the cab on top of me. But I never did, and I just reacted and turned off, and I never was like, oh, I just nearly had a very bad accident, could have seriously or killed me. And I was just like, whatever, go home and sleep. And next day I was at work.
Well,
And yeah,
the
it's
danger,
really
the dangers that we face as men, right, are predominantly physical, and we never consider that there's an emotional aspect to it, right? And I think that that is part of the challenge that the world views men, is that we're not permitted to have emotions, and if we do,
right.
we 100% have to control them. There's
Mm-hmm.
because think about these men that you see that are, they lack any control. You see these, and I hate to pick on the trans community or the alphabet people, but they're
Mm-hmm.
on. You watch them on TikTok, on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
They're losing their mind and crying and screaming, having the closest thing to a 2 year old tantrum I've ever seen. And
yeah.
these are
I've seen one.
adult
Sorry.
men. They're adult men having tantrums. And I'm sitting here going, oh my God. Like,
Yeah,
I couldn't ever imagine, let alone record and publish myself having a conniption fit about pronouns. And it's
yeah.
like, oh my God. There's a.
Well, they've
There's a.
rejected, like the modern leftist ideology has rejected, um, in totality, this idea of like the masculine or traditional masculinity, or I mean, they basically just called all of masculinity toxic.
Yeah.
They
Oh
haven't
yeah.
bothered to figure out which parts of traditionally masculine behavior are actually, for the social good, and which aren't. They've just thrown it all under the bus as toxic, gotten rid of it. And of course, what that's done is you've taken away the guardrails to male behavior. So now you just have self-appointed men who are acting in ways that are the antithesis of what traditional masculinity, or even I think a rational masculinity, would have us doing. But to them, it's totally fine, because all you would like, as soon as you try and make reference to more traditional, or just more like, I just think of them as more rational modes of masculinity, they just call you like some, you know, they'll call you some istophobe. Let's put it that way. They'll call you some word that carries some massive social penalty that they don't care about wielding.
But I'd like to add with the trans thing Mean was just talking about earlier, with how they can't handle some things that they get called, and it's like there's this one person I know in a drinking group I'm with, and they're trans. Everybody knows it. And then one of my other friends, he's criticized one of the games they play because he doesn't quite like it. Whatever. He made a comment, and they lost their shit for 3 days straight. And it's like it was over a comment on how the game is played or how the game plays something. Something very, very small, like,
It was about
oh,
the video game. It
I
wasn't
kicked
about
a
that.
rock into the side of your tire. Oh no. It was just absolutely astounding to hear, because it's like they sound so well put up when you're in a voice call with them, and then as soon as you go away and something happens, it's like, who let loose the floodgates?
Well, because it's so easy. Anyone can hold it together when things are going well. Anyone
Oh yeah.
can hold it together on a podcast or on a news interview for 10 minutes. But
Mm,
to me, it's always interesting to see. Well, let's see what your character is when we add a little pressure, a little stress. Something happens. You see it at the
yeah.
job all the time, where you got these people who just think they are all that, and yeah, and then all of a sudden an emergency comes around where they need to make an on-the-fly decisive decision using their experience and critical thinking skills, and they just shit the bed. And it's just like, yeah, well, okay, so forgive me for not being impressed by people who just sound so slick when things are looking good.
Yeah.
I'm more impressed by the wartime conciliaries, by the people who can, and that kind of stuff. I think comes from a deeper security, a deeper sense of self. You can't just all of us. If you're a person who acts in an out of control, emotionally wild manner all the time, like in your personal and professional life, and then all of a sudden the circumstances require you to be not that. I don't think it's very easy to just suddenly will yourself into not that. I think you're
Yeah.
still going to be acting crazy, and yeah,
I'm going to
Because
quote you, Chris, and you
oh,
said,
go ahead. I'll go after you.
I'm going to quote you, Chris, on something you said a long time ago that I turned into a meme because I thought it was hilarious. You said, you told somebody, like, stop being stupid. And wait, you can't do that because you are stupid. Stupid people just can't suddenly stop being stupid or choose not to be stupid. And I laughed so hard at that, I turned it into a meme because it's true. Stupid people can't just choose not to be stupid, right? Because you're
it's
stupid.
just another way of saying, yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is just the most depressing thing that exists.
But we have a society currently that is not. And here's the thing, I think there is a very large disparity between the perception presented on social media about how men behave in actuality versus reality, and then the observable world of how men behave. Because if men really behaved as badly as we're being made out to that we do, we would tear this fucker down. There would
Well, and
be we would destroy everything, but that
none of
isn't
these
happening.
feminists are around. None of these feminists are around when men exhibit traditionally masculine behaviors that are unambiguously heroic. So, for example, there have been too many shootings in the U.S. to count over the past few years. In at least a few of them, there have been instances, like I think in that one movie theater shooting, there have certainly been instances
Well,
of
that church
men.
shooting in Texas.
Yeah, there have been a bunch where men have literally taken bullets to and shielded women and children with their bodies quite intentionally. And that's been in all the leftist media that I've seen it reported in. It's been reported with no, like, it's been.
Well, you froze.
Oh, oh shit. But since there's a moment here, I'd like to re-add with the thing about keeping the control and everything with the trans thing we were doing earlier. It's like with
Mm-hmm.
my work being a truck driver, I'm always watching out for what other people are doing a lot of the time. Sometimes I zone out because I know where I'm going, but that's besides the point. It's like a few times I've been going through an intersection at yellow and I'm carrying a bunch of pickups that are like a few £1,000s worth. So my truck's extra heavy now. And it's like someone decides to cut the intersection from the turning lane thinking I'm going to be stopping when I'm already entering the intersection. And it's like I could have had a moment where I tap them and then get out and lose all my control, or just brake, horn, and keep going, which I've done before, or with just people not doing what they're supposed to. And it's like I don't know. It's just something similar that I thought of.
Sure, I can
Because it's like
appreciate
I got
that.
to act to this professional standard, being a truck driver and holding these commercial vehicles at bay from causing mass havoc, like the
Because
guy
you
with
can
the
kill people.
killdozer.
You,
Yeah,
you,
it's
you
like with the killdozer. It's like he's got a commercial equipment and he chose to use it that certain way, and that's what happened.
yeah.
And with my truck, it's like it's about the same fucking weight, 15,000 gross kgs or something.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
lot of
heavy
weight.
thing.
You're a projectile,
Exactly. It's like
and quite a
And
heavy
it's
one.
like I carry like a while back earlier this month, I had a delivery that I had to do, which was 4 pallets of chain from the States for this logging company stuff that's called Promac. They do cutting equipment and stuff for logging industries and other places. And it was 9,000 pounds worth on 4 pallets. And it's like adding that to my truck with the extra 3,000 pounds of regular load, I was 12,000 pounds over my original weight limit. It's like going down a hill and through the mountain highways. It's like, oh fuck,
Well, that
something goes wrong. Oh shit, I got
that's
to
it.
keep my
Goes back
cool and
to the
stuff.
men having to have control and we do the dangerous things, right?
Exactly.
So, as a male, you take risk, and that
Hmm.
is part and parcel of being male. Females take a different kind of risk. Their risk is emotional. They risk they risk their feelings when they engage with us, right? They risk being injured, like the conversation we had earlier. You know, most girls have that roulette wheel in their head, or that
Hmm. Who's gonna do what to me, kind
right.
of thing.
So that is a difference of perspective that is unreal.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
they risk their feelings getting hurt. We risk our entire bodies getting hurt on something.
we risk our lives for the
Life and
pursuit,
limb, as they say.
right? And but we don't do it with any thought.
No,
Like,
it's just ingrained in our
oh
head.
yeah,
It's like this is what we got to do.
hey Bucky,
Yeah. Instinctual.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a quick break here. I gotta get
sure.
some water. Food. I have not
Yeah.
had breakfast yet.
You've lived the longest amongst this group. What's the dumbest? And I don't say dumbest, but would you say that growing up you made more decisions not based with your safety in mind than decisions with your safety in mind?
All my decisions were made with no safety in mind.
Why do you think men operate that way?
Well, when we're young, and you guys spoke on this earlier about drinking in college and stuff like that, and just in general, a 19-year-old raging hormone boy and a hot young teenage girl, and then they're both drinking. There is nobody in control there.
No.
Especially, I mean, the boy wasn't in control when the date started, barely.
Well,
Just
yeah.
have common fucking sense and well being for himself, you know. But then all that shit goes bye bye and out the window when you start drinking. I never seen any use in alcohol after a while. I never, I got in a lot of trouble over the years because of alcohol. I made a lot of bad decisions, put it that way, because of alcohol. And I always had a lot of money, so I was always able to go, yeah, here, boom, whatever. And then because and I've never been forced to quit drinking. They've asked me politely several times, but nobody, nothing was really on my ass about it. But just one day woke up and and I looked back and I thought, man, I fucked up a lot. And I just said, and this shit ain't getting, isn't any better for me than it was 10 years ago. So I just said, I'm done.
You
And I
know,
stopped drinking. And it was just, to
that
me, I just wish I'd have had that grow up moment when I was 30.
so why do you think that is amongst men that we don't tend to evaluate our decisions until we're 4 decades into life? That we start considering, you know, maybe some of my decisions weren't too smart, right? So that's where I think there's uh, an opening for men to do things to make better men in the future that we're not doing now. I don't think that young men are being told by other men how to behave properly. You've got a near 70 to 80% single mother rate
That's the
amongst,
problem.
well, so that problem falls on men's shoulder because men aren't being the type of individual that a woman can look at or they can spend time with and determine, yes, I should be monogamous to this one guy, devote myself to this one guy and his success because men treat women like a resource. They're a piece of ass. They're somebody to talk to when I'm bored. They're somebody to hang out with. But if it's too inconvenient, I'm out. I'll just find another one. If they have an actual requirement of me or they put an expectation on me, oh man, I'm out. That's men need to own their own responsibility and stop spitting their seed in every female that asks for it. You know, there needs to be men taking the initiative to return our society to the right order in which men are responsible for their actions and behaviors. They're held accountable for what they say and do, and they put themselves in a position to improve the world around them, which
and
is
and I've got to disagree somewhat because I mean you should always do what you're saying. All that should always be going on in your life, but it's also should be if a woman is going to freely engage in sex, she should be also responsible.
oh, I'm not saying she's not.
And
And
that's what
our
kills me about the abortion bullshit, right? Anybody can take a pill. 92% of all abortions are done in the male. I mean, to me, if you can't take a day after pill because you don't, you made a mistake, I don't understand why you have to wait till you're pregnant to have an abortion. I
well,
mean, I don't get that, and I don't agree with the too much of the abortion bullshit, but I don't disagree with it either. And
well, there's an accountment to it. So, what Jordan Peterson was talking about this the other day, and I thought he was really on point. And he said, you know, you don't quite understand how revolutionary birth control is. The ability to have sex without consequence, right? That
yeah,
that is huge. That's
Yes.
huge. That and he was talking about he's like because you're taking the consequence of promiscuity out, whereas our society worked because sex was reserved for marriage and it produced people and those people were raised by two other people that loved each other. Now sex is not that way. It's become a resource of enjoyment, pleasure, although it is quite pleasurable. It stopped having the required responsibility for the action, right?
well, not really, because actual it's the birth rate, the single mother birth rate has dropped over the years. Um, Now, uh, I don't think abortion rates have went up, other than there's more people than there was 20 years ago. But
I'd have to look
that
at
being
that on
said,
that.
I think a lot of the thing is due to disease. You know, you don't know what you're getting into, just like the girl doesn't know what she's getting into.
But the bigger
And
consequence has
most of the
generally
guys
been
I know
pregnancy.
that are in their 20s and 30s that are out fucking around always use condoms for the most part.
Well, that's
At least that's what they brag about.
right. Well, the other side of that equation is that there's no incentive for a man to be monogamous and a good, upstanding man when he can get the carnal knowledge of a woman without the commitment that should be associated with having access to her. And the problem is, these girls are being told that being promiscuous is okay, and then they hit 30 and they've got a body count of, you know, 20 or 30 guys they've slept with. And there's no guy that's like, yeah, I mean, make a wife out of you. At least not one that is going to be an ideal mate for them. So
You'd be surprised.
I know, but there's a lot associated to like as an example. If we take my friend Phil, he's he's a virgin. He's in his mid 20s, and when he picks a mate, one requires they can't have a kid. So that's going to really limit his pool of potential females at 30 because he's not wanting one with a that's been very promiscuous, very promiscuous, and that's going to be a he would be constituted as a really good mate because he's financially secure, he's well read, well versed, he's like a good guy. So that guy will at 30 will have the ability to just choose the best of the females that are in that category. But the my point being is There could
upon
have
their side.
been so many other women that might have been a great mate for him or a better mate for him that were talked into the idea that promiscuity is has no consequence, right? And that they don't have to save themselves for anyone. They're being told a lie. They're being told a belief system that was propagated by men in the 80s and 90s to get laid. Oh, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you've had slept with a guy. As long as you'll sleep with me, is at the end of that sentence, right? And then you go into your 2000s because it kind of started, I would say, the 60s. You know, the sexual revolution was the 60s and 70s. And then the
Oh
80s
yeah.
and 90s were debauchery of drugs. Let's try
Oh
all this
yeah.
shit, right? And then
Oh yeah.
you get into your 90s and 2000s, and then the advent of the internet, and people become massively more connected, and the hookup culture comes right behind that.
Oh yeah.
So you've had, over the course of a 40-year span, you've had intimacy from being traditionally done amongst marriage or with the intent of marriage, right? To it being a transactional thing where it's like, hey, let's Netflix and chill, right? This is something so casual that I can order it online. And okay, you're looking pretty hot. Let's do this, and let's commit one of the most intimate acts a human can.
It is the human
So,
can do other than have a child together.
yeah, and that's a that's a very big problem, and I think it falls on the shoulder of men because women aren't going to change their behavior because there's a truth that I've learned. Women will behave in the manner in which they are treated. If a man treats a woman like a lady and treats a woman like she's of virtue, she'll act like it. But if he treats her like a resource or treats her like a thing to enjoy, they believe that that's how they're supposed to act and they act accordingly. And I think that's where men have to really change how we are observed in the world is that we're not the ones we need to be the ones that are the pillar of our culture and our society and we're not doing that. And I
I
think
I
that's a
listen to
challenge.
I listen to Peterson too and stuff, and I him and a few other people, and I've heard one of them, and I can't forget which one, but say something to the extent that it's really hard for younger people these days to have a meaningful relationship when you think the first date you're on and the first time you have sex that she's supposed to let you come on her face because that's what you grew up watching on the internet.
Yeah, I would say that there might be some challenging expectations of what an actual relationship looks like.
Yeah, because what they see in online, because anybody can type in something on a fucking Google search and it's going to come up.
Yeah.
I don't
Mem.
care how old you are.
I don't know if
Well,
Mem's
the
back.
same thing occurred with the sitcoms, you know? Exact same thing. Everybody was supposed to be jackasses, and that's part of what happened to society. They're all jackasses.
Yeah. I think we'll call this a session, gentlemen, and we'll pick up next week. I appreciate y'all coming out, and we'll pick this up next week where I think we're gonna. This week we were talking about how the world observes men, or at least how we perceive it, and now I want to talk next week. We'll get into what could be a way forward that makes sense, that we can begin to start the ideal of change. How does that happen, right? How do I think Peterson is a piece of that in the people that he's reached, and I think there's definitely a time that we need to consider. There has to be someone held responsible for our society, and we can't just keep blaming it on the left. That's not an answer. We can't keep just saying
Oh
what's
no,
wrong,
it's not just how you
right?
vote. There's nothing to do with that. They got common sense on the left too, most of them.
Right. That's the
And
thing. It's like, if
know,
that's I'm of the belief that, Democrat or Republican, we agree on 90%. There's only ten
some of
percent
this
we
shit's just
disagree
common
on.
fucking sense.
Well, common sense ain't common anymore.
This is true.
And that's part of what these discussions are about, is to ferret out the information that's not being disseminated and put it out. And if anything, we might start a conversation that somebody else has. And they go, "Oh yeah, we were talking, I watched these guys talk, and they brought up a idea that I talked to this guy about, and that we really expanded on it, and it turned into a thing," right? I am hoping that people watch this with the idea that we're all looking at how men approach and affect the world around us. And I think men as a group, we've been, and Tim Allen said it as a joke, you know, men as a group have been looking into women for a very long time. And it's very true. Men have looked into how to manipulate women to give us what we want with the least amount of effort conceivable. And the drawback of that is we've created a culture where women aren't valuable to us anymore. And I think we need to change that. So, next week, we'll talk about that.